to tackle the twin challenges of climate change and gender inequality. 2, we are looking at creating an enabling environment for more widespread uptake of climate solutions by women. And 3, we look to develop metrics to measure changes in gender inequality, gender norms, and women's empowerment, both as an outcome for climate interventions and as a driving factor for increased climate resilience. We have with us an esteemed panel of speakers. Some will give the keynote, others will join us during the panel discussion, and we'll also have experts in the room whom we'll be hearing from next as soon as we hear the keynote address. But before we get to the keynote address, we do have a video, and we want you to watch it at this moment.
We decided to partner on Aim for Climate because we think as Impact Platform on Gender that putting women and developing options and opportunities for women within the climate change crisis is very important. We need to make sure that any climate solution includes women because we need everyone on board to make sure that we deal with climate change as it is happening and as it is getting worse. So now is the time to make sure we have evidence, we have opportunities, and we have ways of dealing with climate change in agri-food systems that put women at the center. Why is an investment in climate change and food systems important? Is because when you look at what's happening to the world, climate change directly impacts farming and farming systems and agriculture. It's one of our most intimate relationships with nature. And so, of course, farming and agriculture is directly impacted by climate change. And so we need to figure out how we can actually start feeding the world when the world is heating up. And part of that means understanding how we can actually get everybody on board. And part of getting everyone on board is getting women on board because women also have solutions for climate change. For the CGIAR Gender Impact Platform, we have about 4 priority areas that we would like to see more investments in. One is to integrate gender in the research and develop innovations and make sure that women are involved from the beginning to end. 2 is to make sure that we disseminate the right extension and information about climate change and that it is tailored to what women need. 3 is to actively close the gender digital divide because that will be important as more and more innovation and information is available about climate change. And last but not least, tailor financial services so that women can actually invest in climate smart agriculture. We hope with a sprint on gender within Aim for C that we can get enough partners together to actually make gender as the center part and that we have enough evidence, enough options, opportunities to make sure that women do become part of the solution as climate change is happening. We decided to partner on Aim for Climate because we think as Impact Platform on Gender that putting women and developing options and opportunities for women within the climate change crisis is very important. We need to make sure that any climate solution includes women because we need everyone on board.
Thank you. I believe you are giving us round 2. Thank you for that. So that's Dr. Nicolene Dehan giving us a summary of why the platform as well as many other partners have joined the Gender Sprint. She'll be joining us later on. So to continue with the conversation, or maybe to get us started, we are going to hear from Dr. Candice Vaslin, who is Senior Climate Advisor with USAID for International, that is the United States Agency for International Development. We know that this is the world's premier development agency. Ms. Vaslin advises the administrator on climate matters and is charged with driving strategic progress on administrators' powers policy priorities at the intersection of climate, finance, and international development across the agency, the Biden-Harris administration, and with external partners. She has an impressive bio, and I want you to go to the website and check it out later. But at this point, let's listen to her keynote. A round of applause for her.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us here today. Administrator Power sends her regards. So, and thank you, Nicolene, for that introduction and for setting the stage for an exciting event this evening. I want to start by thanking CGIAR for their continued partnership with USAID as we work together to tackle gender inequity in agri-food systems. I also want to thank you for leading this effort to catalyze such a large sum of funding for at least 20 partners across the gender-based challenges in agri-food systems through the Innovation Sprint under the Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate, Aim for Climate initiative. It's an effort led by the US and the UAE to accelerate development and scaling of innovation for climate-smart agriculture and food systems. I should also thank Award African Women in Agricultural Research for Development for their leadership in galvanizing a further $24 million to strengthen capacity for women researchers to conduct agricultural research and translate findings into policy action. Our Deputy Administrator Coleman made a call to action for Aim for Climate in May to increase ambition on investments in ag innovation that leads to better outcomes for women, and you rose to the challenge, so thank you. I feel others are inspired to follow your lead, and so just wanted to raise here today that Aim for Climate Innovation Sprints welcomes commitments from the private sector, from NGOs or academia to invest in R&D and innovation in the ag and smart food systems. There are over 50 existing sprints that are going on right now within Aim for Climate, and they're open to joining new partners joining, and we also would love to see new proposals for sprints, which can be submitted anytime on our website. So hopefully we'll see some from folks in this room or watching tonight. And as others have said, and I'm sure will say, people do not interact with the benefit of local food systems in the way that they can across the world. And climate change is creating inequalities and deepening existing ones. At the same time, climate change is also fixing existing challenges and trying to uplift social norms that have impacted negatively to women and girls. So as we innovate to shift our food systems and make them more resilient to the impacts of climate change, we must ensure that these challenges also break down barriers and create new opportunities for those who have been marginalized. And we still have a lot of work to do. An FAO report in April found that on the status of women in agricultural food systems presented very stark reality, that over the last 10 years, we've made very little progress to address gender inequality in food systems, and that given that women produce 80% of food in regions, we find this unacceptable. So that's why at USAID, we've taken a number of steps over the last few years to change that and to accelerate the progress for women and girls in food systems. Earlier this year, USAID launched Generating Resilience and Opportunities for Women, or GROW. This is a $335 million commitment to elevate gender through our programs. GROW will tackle urgent challenges that women are facing in food systems, in water systems, including climate change, while unlocking opportunities for women to advance economically, ultimately benefiting their families, benefiting communities, and improving resilience and economic growth. And the GROW commitment draws on evidence and learning that we have amassed over the past decade to focus on 3 priorities. First, to boost productivity and resilience of women farmers. Second, to help women benefit from more diverse and higher paying off-farm jobs. And third, and finally, in our humanitarian programs, we prioritize addressing the unique needs that women and girls in crisis face. To give you a concrete example of GROW, we have set a target of doubling the number of women applying to improved on-farm technologies and management practices, doubling it, in a way of driving change for smallholder farmers that are struggling to adapt. And we have also announced that the US will be part of a technical collaboration cooperative to support countries in turning food security's declaration into action. We are eager to leverage existing initiatives to ensure countries have access to technical support to achieve climate action in agricultural and food systems. And we know that to achieve our goals, we also need to invest in agricultural research and innovation, as I said earlier, and recognize the need and the preferences of women as well as men farmers. And that is why yesterday we were pleased to announce that through the Feed the Future program, we'll be providing $100 million to CGIAR over the next 2 years, pending appropriations, for greater R&D and innovation in climate-smart food systems. This was a major announcement yesterday. Thank you. I'm very excited about. And we think will really move the ball on this effort. So as we're working to be intentional about putting women at the heart of ag food systems, we also need to make sure we're doing our work that takes into across all these lenses. Unfortunately, I'm full of bad stats today that show us how much more progress we need to make. In a 2021 report by Climate Policy Initiative on global landscapes for climate finance found that out of $632 billion in climate investments in 2019 and 2020, only 2% was invested with a gender lens, 2%. And that is pretty stark and provides a lot of opportunity for us to improve. So I guess that's the good news there, is we can build on that progress. So USAID is working to address this gap. Beyond our innovation sprints that I noted earlier, we have also launched the first ever public finance facility directly aimed at increasing finance for women and equity. Our Climate Gender Equity Fund, pronounced CGIF, brings together Amazon, Visa, Reckitt's, UPS, and alongside USAID to create capital available for women-led and women-benefiting organizations. Administrator Power announced this at UNGA earlier this year, and we've already gotten new partners to join the initiative. So far, we've secured $17 million from corporations, foundations, and other funders, and it's a flagship program under the new WISE program at USAID. So I know I'm full of a ton of acronyms. We love them at USAID, but just wanted to capture all of the great work that we're doing here, so hopefully we continue to build these. But just to briefly explain WISE, WISE was an initiative launched in October by Vice President Harris with commitments from over 20 public and private partners totaling $900 million to advance efforts that support women and economic security across both the blue and green sectors, including food and water. And through WISE, governments, the private sector, foundations, civil society, and multilateral organizations are joining forces to commit to meet the WISE objectives through their own programs and supporting 4 flagship U.S. government programs. So while this funding is only one piece of the puzzle, it's an important piece. And we know historically that climate solutions have not received the amount of funding we need to achieve ambitious but necessary objectives. With these announcements, we are very much closer to closing this gap and creating more livable and more just future. Finally, I wanted to reemphasize the opportunity to join our great efforts. AIM for Climate is accepting innovation sprints applications, as I said. Hope some of you in this room will bring those to bear. And we're committed to improving outcomes for women across the value chains and think how we can scale in innovations the most to the people that need the most. And we're interested in companies joining the existing sprints and taking their own initiative as well. I've listed a potpourri of efforts that we have at USAID and a number of funding mechanisms and tools, but we also want to help other countries, other partners to create their own efforts to build on this very important issue that, as I said, we do have a lot of work to do. So I'm hopeful that we'll all collaborate together and next year, be on the stage and have made a lot more progress in closing this gap. So thank you, and appreciate you guys.
Thank you. And aren't we glad to hear about the investments and the progress made? Okay, good. So thank you so much for the keynote address and for getting us started, Dr. Candice. So we'd like to move on. And at this point, as I mentioned, we have experts in the room, and they're going to talk to us on how we want to, or how we should accelerate progress towards gender equality and climate resilience. They're all going to share a couple of lessons from their research. So I'll invite them all on stage, starting up with Dr. Elizabeth Bryan, who is Senior Scientist with IFPRI, in the Environment and Technology, Production Technology Division. She conducts policy-relevant research on gender-sustainable agricultural production, climate-smart agriculture, small-scale irrigation, and water, energy, food nexus. Let's encourage her. She's here already, but I'll also invite Dr. Vivian Pola, Gender Monitoring and Evaluation Specialist at the International Potato Center, who has over 15 years of experience working directly with farmers and indigenous groups in rural communities in agricultural technology innovation, adaptation to climate change, and food security. We also have with us Dr. Rajashri Joshi, Program Director by Development Research Foundation. She's a social scientist and a professionally trained social worker with thorough knowledge on development issues. Round of applause for her. And finally, we have Dr. Todd Crane, who is Principal Scientist, Climate Change Adaptation. Todd's research centers on interdisciplinary approaches to climate change adaptation undertaken by farmers and herders, and how these intersect with scientific research, policies, and development practices. Okay, so first up, Dr. Paula, to my extreme left, will speak to us on testing climate innovations that tackle the twin challenges of climate change and gender inequality. Welcome. For the next 7 minutes.
Okay, let's see. Is it projecting? Is it okay? You can see it? Yeah. So thank you very much, Vivian, for giving me this space, and I'm going to be sharing with you some experiences on testing climate innovations that tackle the twin challenges. What do we mean by twin challenges, right? It is something that has been advancing on one side, but requires to advance in a similar dimension on the other side in terms of gender equality, through the cases of potato and sweet potato agri-food systems. What is it? Okay, so
It's moving here, but not
it's
here.
moving there. Okay, so the climate change challenges that we're going to be focusing specifically are related to temperature for the cases of potato and sweet potato that I will be sharing. We expect that the temperature will rise by 2070 from 1 to 6 degrees. The heat wave amplitudes will be wider, and the heat frequency, the frequency of these waves will also become larger. So what does that mean for the system? There will be significant impact on root and tuber production. These higher temperatures will affect root formation, tuber formation, the storage of the material. There will be a significant impact on production. Changes, of course, in pests and disease attack, especially late blight in potato, along with other pests and diseases, sweet potato virus attack in sweet potato. So there will be significant effect, and we're not adapting enough. That will also generate changes in the planting time, the spatial distribution, and the choice of cultivars. An example in potato is that potato cultivation has moved upward in central Peru, an average of 306 meters since the 70s. So that means that we are definitely going to experience significant changes, and different people will experience those changes differently. So there is one of the twins, the technical twin, generating technical alternatives. For example, breeding for new traits, for heat and stress tolerance, for drought tolerance, to enable fast growth and early maturation of the roots and the tubers, and disease resistance. However, the big challenge is that gender inequality is not necessarily addressed in the same way. So there will be effect on that other twin of climate, of gender inequality. So how does that affect? Well, we have a differential access and use of land, the stability of use of land, the quality and the quantity of the land that men and women access is different. There's unequal access to inputs for production, such as fertilizer, pest and disease control, equipment and products. The financing, the markets, and the agricultural training and education come through differently. So how will that impact climate change? Well, in general, adaptation and mitigation alternatives that are being generated by this technical twin run the risk of not being adopted. And what does it mean for gender equality? It means that technological alternatives could exacerbate poverty and inequality. So addressing gender in technology design and deployment becomes a critical issue. using tools to analyze the positive potential and negative implications of technologies is a critical aspect. So how is the use of inputs? Which of these inputs have unequal access? Where can women access these inputs and where they can't? What are the implications of labor for these climate-smart technologies? Can they actually access the labor that is needed to deliver this production process? The use of byproducts, for example, are they involved in the use of products and byproducts? If we bring up the example of sweet potato, it is not only the root that is used, but also the vines that are used for animal feeding. It is also that they sell the vines as seed. It has multiple implications that we may not be analyzing. An example in potato is that we are actually addressing is the zero-tillage potato in rice-based systems. So what we see is that women have significant challenges in labor in order to produce production. Those who have worked in potato, have harvested potato, know how backbreaking labor it is. And in those cases, we've proposed technologies such as the zero-tillage working in rice paddy, where you plant the potatoes in the middle of the rice straw, therefore reducing the need to break the ground during planting and reducing the need to break the ground for harvesting. You actually just pick up the rice straw and are able to harvest the potatoes directly, as you can see in the image. So those technologies have great potential to be adopted by women, addressing both the labor constraints that they face, reducing the need to break the ground, reducing the loss of water, and reducing the inputs needed on reducing the weeds that grow on the land. Another example, oops, I'm afraid it's not showing. Another example is the development of sweet potato varieties that address food quality traits by product usage. What does that mean? It means that many of the breeding programs develop varieties thinking about the yield, thinking about the pest and disease, thinking about the adaptation to water shortage. But some of them run the risk of not being adopted because they don't meet the quality traits needed by women. Does it taste the way it needs to taste to put it on your plate? Sometimes it doesn't. So how do you address that? You actually have to go down into the breeding pipeline and address those priorities from the very beginning. Addressing access to seed and markets is also a challenge. You develop an amazing variety that is put out on the market to be adopted. However, women have limitations of accessing markets. They cannot purchase the variety. What do we do in those cases? We need to harmonize the seed system and think about the informal seed system that will enable them to access that seed appropriately and be able to benefit from the varieties that have been developed. Finally, how can we expand the experience of potato and sweet potato, managing both the system and also the breeding pipelines to capture women's needs? Well, the first thing we have to keep in mind is that technology is not gender neutral. It holds significant bias from the developers, from the people who are designing this process. That is the first step. Acknowledge that it's not neutral and that we need to address it. And then think about a structural change that addresses a comprehensive and systematic attention to gender in technology design and deployment. Not just one-off experience, but it's something that you look at over and over in all of the pipelines, in all of the technologies. And finally, an attention to policy frameworks to facilitate equitable benefits for women. We cannot continue to go in circles looking at the technology when the policy framework does not allow them to participate equally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paula, for highlighting using the root and tuber crop systems where the inequalities are and where the opportunities could lie So for our audience, please keep your questions coming up, and we will take them at the end of this. Now we'll move on to Dr. Rajashri Joshi. She's right here.
Yeah, but I will need a presentation.
We had a technological challenge. I don't know whether the slides are not moving.
Got the first one, this one.
I believe they were trying to address that.
See if I can get it. Oh, now it works.
Seems like it's back.
It's back?
Yeah, you can.
Great.
Let
you
me
can
know and
sit.
I'll advance for you.
Oh, sure, sure. Okay, that's great. Okay.
So you can.
Yeah. Can I begin?
Sure, go ahead. So she's going to speak on farm women's centrality for climate actions in the Global South. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So I think this is, thank you, Elizabeth, for giving me this opportunity. And I think this is very important forum when I think at various events, different things are being discussed. And I'm trying to track the discussion, and most of the discussion is on mitigation. And also a whole lot of discussion is on carbon farming, also energy sector. But I think when it comes to gender, I think a whole lot of things needs to be done. And I think women are disproportionately affected. As it is, they are marginalized communities. And with climate change, I think a lot of problems are being faced by women. So I will be talking about farm women centrality based on the kind of work that we have been doing in India. And some of the learnings and insights I will try to share with all of you. I'm sure in this group there are many people. I can see girls and officials from SEVA. So there are many organizations doing good work. So I am sure they will agree with some of the findings that I will be sharing. The climate change is being faced across globe. However, I think in South Asia and also in India, the kind of its effects are being faced severely, and because of the high exposure, low adaptive capacity, and also more sensitivity, and because of which the vulnerability is in general high. And here why vulnerability is high? Because of the climate sensitive economic activities that are being adopted in India. And in most of these climate sensitive activities, the women are very much a part of these agriculture systems that are being followed. And in India, it is in growing feminization of farming. So in general, across many regions, the women are involved. But in India, there is a growing feminization of farming because able-bodied men are trying to, they are migrating by choice or in search of higher returns. They are migrating, and it is ultimately the women who are staying in villages and they are involved in agriculture activities, be it crop, be it livestock, or be it household level activities. So that is the kind of context that we are talking about. And climate change is affecting the farming, overall farming, and within that, the kind of activities in which the women are involved. For example, weeding, for example, harvesting. So those are resowing, sowing and resowing. So these are the activities in which women are involved. And I think because of the uncertainty and growing variability of climatic events, I think the women are facing a lot of challenges. Definitely they are, in general, 50% of our population is women, and therefore we have to make them partners in development. And I think we are talking about agriculture here. So I think the US lady, she mentioned that we are talking about Agrifood system. So we are calling agriculture as a culture. And I think when it comes to culture and tradition, women have very important role to play. In general, we all will agree that women are the custodians of useful traditional knowledge, be it related to seeds, be it related to post-harvest, or be it related to preservation of seeds. So climate change is also affecting food security and nutritional security, and also the agrobiodiversity. And that's the kind of context, again, that is there. And therefore, I think we are talking about gender-related issues, we are talking about nutrition-related issues, agriculture-related issues. So that's why it is very necessary to see it as a continuum. So in the light of this, I think we have to maintain the women's centrality in climate actions and make them as a part of solution. But not only that, we have to make them as a part of solution. I think the entire world can see what solutions that women can provide. And they are genome saviors. If you see the kind of seeds that are there, the agrobiodiversity that is remaining in few parts of world, I think that thanks to women who have preserved this kind of immense beneficial agrobiodiversity. And this agrobiodiversity is really amazing because I think they are providing resilient seeds, they are providing diversity, and they have kind of power to adapt with this climate change, and women are playing important role in this. So this is one kind of example where we have started women centrality, and we have started the local seed banks. And not only we have started local seed banks in which women are involved, I think we have to also respect and revive their culinary skills. And I think because that's very important for maintaining the biodiversity, and they know how to use it, what are the various dishes that they can make it. And there is a scope for entrepreneurship also. We have started Nahari, which is Indigenous Cuisine Corner, and that's an example how that can also generate livelihoods for women, and their inherent knowledge can be tapped for that. So these are some of the examples how this is a Rahibai, the highest national award. Padma Shri has been conferred upon her for this kind of seed system that she is maintaining for her village, and she has mobilized all the women from her village also. And today it is a movement. Same thing, this is the kind of traditional food, that wild food resources, and women have immense knowledge, especially tribal indigenous women have very good knowledge about the wild food resources. And I think the habitat destruction is also happening. So I think this knowledge needs to be retained, and for that also women's centrality needs to be maintained. Second thing is climate change is also leading to a lot of drudgery, hardship on women, and for that I think farm mechanization is important. But the kind of farm mechanization that is being introduced or being practiced or being promoted is not women friendly. So I think there is a need to have women centrality also in farm mechanization, and we have to understand her needs. We have to customize our machineries according to her needs, and taking into account the hardship and ergonomic principles also. So these are various interventions where I think we can focus on farm women centrality. This is one example where in Uttarakhand, which is in Himalaya, hill women have taken initiative to rejuvenate and restore their one panchayat land, which are degraded community pastures. And they have come forward, and because they are facing problem in collecting fodder resources and also fetching water, because this habitat is destructed. So entirely farm women centrality is maintained. In livestock also, women have immense knowledge, and they are taking care of cattle and livestock. So I think there also we can create a cadre, and we can give them access to knowledge, skills, and also we can ensure that they play important role in also. And these are second last slide where I think we spoke about digital divide or gender divide, and it should not happen that while chasing innovations or while chasing technology, we are denying some things to women. So I think when we are talking about digitalization, there is a penetration of digital ecosystem in villages, but how that connectivity will be used by women, how that connectivity can benefit the women, that's very important, and that I think we have to ensure through our various practices. So in essence, I think gender sensitive climate actions are very much required, and there are several such programs and policies that are there. We need to replicate and upscale in many other parts of India, and I am happy that IFPRI and USAID and this AIM platform has taken this challenge, and they are trying to introduce actions around this theme, and we would be happy to be part of it from India. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for taking us through excellent examples coming out of India and Southeast Asia. Thank you. Now we'll move on to Dr. Todd Crane, who's going to speak to us on gender-responsive climate innovations in livestock-based systems. Welcome.
Thank you, Vivian. I'm afraid I do not have slides to share, so you're just going to have to look at me and listen, I suppose. The question of gender responsive livestock innovations, and my examples are all going to be drawn from East Africa, specifically in Kenya primarily. It begs the question of we're responding to what? Livestock systems across Africa and even within Kenya are extremely diverse agroecologically, but they're also very diverse in terms of what are the gendered roles and relations around livestock and livestock products. So any gender responsive livestock intervention needs to start with a close understanding of what is the gendered nature of labor, of commerce, of ownership, relating to whatever the particular area is. And this comes in a lot of different forms. Of course, the household is the most obvious location for this, gendered labor. But we find that even within this category, there's high variability depending on age, depending on whether this is in a polygamous marriage. So our research has also found that the marriage position within a household makes a difference in terms of how resources can be accessed, in terms of how labor is distributed. So again, attention to these very contextual and nuanced details within any case has to be the beginning of gender responsive livestock interventions. By way of an example, and this is certainly not unique to livestock, we've seen a number of adaptation and low emission dairy technologies may work technically, excuse me, they may have the desired technical effects, but they have a heavier labor demand. Where does that labor fall? Does that labor, and that's a rhetorical question because I think a lot of people in this room know the answer, it tends to fall on women's unpaid labor. Do we see on the other side that there is the benefit, the profit from that is equally or proportionally distributed? Of course, that is an exception rather than a rule. But it's not just within households that we have to pay attention to this. Markets themselves are gendered and market processes are gendered. We see in the livestock sector, especially in the dairy sector, that a lot of adaptation and low emission practices go hand in hand. They're basically intensification. Intensification often goes hand in hand with commercialization. So the pathways that we see, especially in this case in the dairy sectors in Kenya and in Tanzania as well, the pathways for incentivizing these tend to follow commercialization. Commercial spaces in the formal market tend to be masculine. So we've seen cases where intensification practices being promoted, not by us, but by in the world out there by the dairy sector, say that if you're selling to the cooperative, if you're selling to the processor, paying people on a day-to-day basis creates a lot high transaction costs. Let's do lump payments every 2 weeks, maybe every month. Same amount of milk, same amount of money. But what had been an easy income stream, a fairly low level, but on a day-to-day basis, which was below the radar of women's husbands, suddenly becomes a big chunk of money. When you add up the 75 shillings, 120 shillings, 200 shillings a day into a monthly lump payment, wow, that's a lot of money. It should go to the head of household because that's what happens to large sums of money in the household. And I think it's very important to note here that the perception and the value that this should go to a head of a household is not just by men. This is women themselves see large sums of money and say, this is the role of the head of household to do this. And it comes back to this point about understanding what we're responding to, and this is not just about labor and technology, this is about social norms relating to household headship, management of money, and that kind of decision making. We also see that formalization in markets, formalization is reduction of the informal economy. We've done some research on the informal economy that find the women in the informal economy generally find that they have better opportunity there, that this is a place where they can make their living, where they can have an effective livelihood through the informal economy, whereas the formal economy, again, it's a gendered market. They felt they largely entered this at a disadvantage. And so we have to be careful that in promoting technologies through these particular pathways relating to commercialization, that we aren't actually alienating women from market opportunities, both through household dynamics, but through the market dynamics themselves. A big part of climate change adaptation, if we start to look at the more pastoral sector, we're seeing a lot of changing opportunities. Pastoralism is struggling, especially the last several years of 6 recurrent seasons of drought. So diversification of livelihood activities is often being promoted as a pathway, both for men and for women, to make more successful livelihoods in pastoral or shifting transitional pastoral systems. But again, diversification into, say, agricultural practices or growing of fruit. This implies different sets of knowledge, different sets of relationships, different sets of access to opportunities, capital, and finance. And while it does oftentimes represent opportunity, it also represents new vulnerabilities in terms of getting into commercial fruit production is great when things are good, but when floods come that it cuts off market access, then suddenly your income is gone. So this is, again, attending to what are we responding to. And I think what I'd like to conclude on is, I've mentioned along the way gender, yes, but we have marital status and status within the household. We have age, we have ethnicity, we have a lot of different factors going on here that shape opportunities and shape impacts of not just climate change itself, but of climate change adaptation interventions. And I think we often look at women are impacted by climate change events, but they're also, we have to pay attention to the interventions themselves, but to take and really emphasize intersectional approaches that capture the range of diversity and enable more nuanced and intervention approaches that are attentive to this diversity rather than glossing it over. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Todd, for helping us contextualize, that the question of what are we responding to, you need to focus so that you can be able to have the right approaches. Thank you. And our last speaker for this particular segment is Dr. Elizabeth Bryan. She speaks on how to make climate action more gender responsive. Over to you.
It seems that we're having technical difficulties again, but I can go ahead and get started while hopefully the slides can be pulled up. So as Vivian said, my name is Elizabeth Bryan. I'm a senior scientist at the International Food Policy Research Institute, where I lead a project on Gender, Climate Change, and Nutrition Integration Initiative, or GCAN, which is one of the projects under the CGIAR umbrella that is contributing to this innovation sprint. And I'm really delighted to see this sprint come together. When we had a big Aim for Climate Summit in DC back in May, there were a lot of sprints being launched at that time, and none of them were focused on the social or equity dimensions around designing climate innovations or rolling those out in a way that really benefits everyone. And so we've now brought together a great set of partners, and we're going to be really pushing this forward to focus on these twin challenges, as Vivian said, of addressing gender inequality while also addressing the climate challenge that we face. And I want to point out that right now, the world, is not facing just the climate challenge, but has just come out of a COVID-19 pandemic. We're also facing a continued food price crisis and agricultural input price crisis. And all of these shocks and stressors are compounding. And repeatedly, we see that these shocks and stressors have disproportionate effects on women and girls. So for example, during the pandemic, we saw that the gap in food insecurity between women and men grew, and we also saw gender gaps in employment increasing. In addition, there are also specific impacts on women and girls during times of stress, such as girls being pulled from school, especially adolescent girls, or a rise in gender-based violence, which typically affects women more than men. And all of these impacts have long-term consequences for women and girls in terms of their reproductive health, their income earning opportunities, and the well-being of the women and their children themselves. And they also have serious implications for women and girls' ability to respond to the climate challenge and the next shocks that they're going to face. So we need to be focusing on how to build women's resilience capacities. One other example of how women tend to be disproportionately affected by climate change is shown by a new study which looks at the effects of climate extreme events, so namely heat, stress, and drought on gendered labor supply in agriculture, using data from labor force surveys across a range of African countries. And the study finds that heat waves reduce both men and women's labor allocation in agriculture, but women's reduces less than men. So relative to men's, women's labor allocation in agriculture is going up under especially heat stress. So on the one hand, this highlights women's important contribution to agricultural production and maintaining agricultural production under climate change, while at the same time, it also raises concerns about women's working conditions under increasingly hazardous climate conditions. We also have a review paper that really goes over the literature over the past 10 years. And there's really a wealth of literature out there now that highlights that women tend to have lower resilience capacities. They have different preferences and needs for how they respond to climate challenges that they face. Yet they tend to have less decision-making authority in multiple spaces, including in the household, in their communities, and in policy spaces. And so they're unable to often direct resources or make decisions to adopt practices that would have the greatest benefit for them and meet their needs. We also emphasize in this paper that women are not just victims of climate change, they're not just more vulnerable to climate change. While that's true, they also have important contributions to make. And I think we've heard the panelists already highlight a number of very, very promising examples of how women's knowledge is being used to collect wild foods or to preserve seed varieties. And so these examples are there, and we really need to boost women's resilience capacities to deliver them. We also have a study from Bangladesh, for example, that shows that when women are empowered, when they're involved in agricultural decisions, when they participate in groups, they actually contribute to more production diversification on the farm, moving away from rice cultivation to other foods like fruits. So again, investing in women's resilience capacities and facilitating women's empowerment is not important just for the goal of achieving gender equality, which we want to do, but it also has instrumental value for achieving other goals that we care about. So as Todd said, and I'm glad that he closed with this point because I think it's very important, it's not just the impacts of climate change directly on women, but it's important to think about how the interventions that we roll out affect men and women differently. So if we take the example of climate smart agriculture, I think we all know what this is and the goals of climate smart agriculture: productivity, profitability, adaptation, and mitigation. But this is a largely gender blind framework. It doesn't look at to what extent different climate smart practices or technologies or approaches affect men and women differently. And some practices that are touted as climate smart, like conservation agriculture, we see that these have negative implications for women's labor, for example. So what we really need is a gender lens, and we can call this a fourth pillar of CSA if we want, that ensures that climate-smart innovations are designed with women's preferences and needs in mind, that there's an enabling environment in place to make sure that we have widespread and equitable adoption of these solutions, and that we're also measuring the extent to which climate innovations, or perhaps bundles of innovations, also contribute to gender equality and women's empowerment goals. And these are roughly the 3 focal areas of our sprint. And so I'm really excited to be working in this space with many of you in this room. Okay. So we've identified some promising approaches, and I think the other panelists have already mentioned several of these. One is really looking at increasing women's access to and control over productive resources like land, as well as services like climate information services. And I want to highlight that in particular, access to climate information is really important for effective adaptation, as well as having information about which practices are most appropriate to respond to the climate challenges that people are facing. And I'm delighted that we have a number of Sprint partners who are working on innovative solutions to getting climate information to both men and women farmers, and reducing gaps in the gender digital divide, for example, through new platforms and technologies. Another approach for which there's really strong evidence is the importance of group-based approaches or collective approaches to addressing climate change. So I'm very excited that we also have several partners that are grassroots women's organizations, because they're really leading innovation and efforts in their communities, and we're looking to them to move forward and really enhance the impacts that we want to see on the ground. And lastly, there's a lot of interest, although perhaps not as much research, on the potential and the benefits of including gender transformative approaches with climate interventions. And so I hope that this sprint offers us an opportunity to look more deeply at the benefits of including these approaches with our work and testing them on the ground. And so as we go forward, I really look forward to engaging all of you. I'm excited that we have a panel of farmers coming up to really talk about the experiences that they have on the ground and the work that they're doing. And I think it's also important to have it locally grounded too, because as Todd said, there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of nuances in different contexts in terms of how production works, how food systems work. And so I think with all of the diversity of our sprint, I think we'll be able to tackle all of these complexities together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brian, for giving us those practical steps, especially your last slide on how to make our interventions more gender responsive. Keep your questions for this particular expert group. We will come back to you. But as Elizabeth already preempted, I would like us to move to the next segment or to the next panel or experts in their own right, because they are the voices from the field. They're already doing it on the ground. And we want to hear from them on how they are grounding this research, what is working, what is not working. As Todd has said, what are we responding to? So they'll be able to tell us whether we are still on track. So Dr. Paula, Dr. Joshi, Dr. Crane, and Dr. Brian, thank you very much. We will come back to you during the question and answer segment. You may have your seats. A round of applause for them. Okay, and onto the next segment, where we are going to hear from Ana Laura Sayago. She is an organic honey producer based in Argentina. She engages in climate advocacy in her community and studied sociology. She says what she does is a fantastic way of how people can adapt to climate change and be resilient at the same time. So we'll get to find out. Let's welcome her on stage. We have Eliud Rigut, who's a smallholder farmer. He's a social entrepreneur a smallholder farmer and innovator co-creating solutions for the African continent. He's a co-founder of Silo Africa, an organization that passionately advocates for empowerment of women and youth to have more access to land and mitigation of post-harvest losses through provision of on-farm digitized grain silos to smallholder farmers. Did we? Okay, good. And finally, we have with us a Siwa, a champion farmer. Just a minute. May I welcome Sangitabin Rahod, who is grassroots leader, Siwa champion farmer. She's a grassroots leader for over 5 years. And after finishing her high school, she was able to learn basic computing, and now she leads a group on the importance of savings, and that group is called Bachat Mandal, which means Community Savings Group. We'll get to hear from her, but I also want to invite Mansisha, because you're going to help with translation. Is she around? Okay, but probably we can get started. Okay, she's going to help with Rahod's translation. So let's get this panel started. Starting with you, Eliud, men first, or women before, I don't know. Okay, tell us about your climate innovation and how it helps us solve the twin challenges of climate change and gender inequality.
Thank you very much. I think today, this congregation, you're talking about women, and lucky enough today I'm a man and I'm men faster. Yes, the issue about climate change and the context of women and gender inequality, it's a thorny issue, a very thorny issue, because the big question is, who are at the forefront? Who are the faces on when it comes to climate crisis? And the answer is the women, the answer is the youth. And we are the people who are facing the climate crisis. And as Silo Africa, we decided on a number of issues. I'm a smallholder farmer from Kenya. And one biggest issue that I noted that my parents were going through growing up is the issue of post-harvest losses. In Africa, we are losing up to 40%. And if you quantify that, for example, when you look at the grain value chain that I'm in, 40% in 1 acre of land producing 20 bags. We used to produce 40 bags, by the way. But due to the soil degradation, you're now producing 20 bags. 40% of that is 8 bags. 8 bags is a lot of money. That is money for health. That is money for education for our kids. That is money that should have gone into building the savings and income base for our women. So, I saw it best that let me solve this issue for my family first, because charity begins at home. This is something that we are going through at home. It reached a point where putting food on the table was a big issue. My mom would scratch her head day in, day out. How do I feed our family? How do I feed my family in the context of all this? And this issue was exacerbated during the COVID pandemic. You saw the issues to do with the gender inequality. There was a lot of fights when women were being beaten. And reason being was there was hunger in this family. Men lost their jobs. They couldn't provide again. And all these issues, the burden of providing led to, it fell on women. And so at Silo Africa, I decided, what do I do? I have to provide a solution. So I went back. I didn't do much. I Googled. I realized, oh, there's a 1940 solution that was provided by the food and agriculture organizations. They were fabricating silos. And I went, started fabricating these silos and giving it to the women, because issues to do with adapting to climate change have to be practical. They have to be localized. They have to be grassroots solutions. So we started providing these silos to these women. And and the smallholder farmers. And we saw that they are now storing maize, storing their grains safely. The issues to do with the aflatoxin, issues to do with the weevil infestation, issues to do with all the infestation. They're able to curb it. And on top of it, now we decided, let us put in technology to bulletproof it. Now you are putting in sensors on these silos, and you are able to see. For example, you are an off-taker. You want to purchase this good maize from these farmers. What will you do? You'll be able to log into a system, and you will see which areas to purchase these grains. You'll see the condition of the grains, and you see that when they're able to purchase it, it will be able to the money trickles down to where the farmer is. And you see, from these, you're able to see that if our solutions are not practical, if our solutions are not grassroots, they are not able to impact directly on the incomes of the women. Because as you've seen, the deliberations that are going year in, year out, this is the 28th year of COP, but we are still talking about the same issues. This is the 28th year of COP. But what is happening to the women? Are they uplifted? Are their lives changing? That's the big question.
Great. Thank you for those very practical examples. And I love the fact that you started by solving a problem at home. From Kenya, let's go to Gujarat districts. And Mansi, you'll help us translate. Let's hear about Sangiben's climate innovation and how it solves the twin challenges of climate change and gender inequality.
સંગીતાબેન તમને એવો પ્રશ્ન પૂછ્યો છે એમને કે પર્યાવરણમાં જે બદલાવ આવે છે એની સામે ટકવા માટે આપણા બહેનો શું કરે છે અને એનાથી એમના જીવનમાં એમના રોજગાર પર શું અસર થઈ છે.
નમસ્તે, મારું નામ સંગીતાબેન રાઠોડ છે અને હું સેવામાંથી છું અને હું આજે મારી નહીં પણ સેવામાં જે 25 લાખ બહેનોનું સંગઠન છે ને એની વાત કરવા આવી છું. તો જે બેની વાત કરી કે શું અસર થાય છે, તો પહેલાં તો જે ખેડૂતો જે પોતે બીજાના ખેતરમાં કામ કરવા જતા હોય અને અચાનક એકદમ ગરમી આવી જાય, તાપમાન વધી જાય, તો પછી એકદમ ચક્કર ખાઈને ભૂઈ પડી જાય, તો એ ખેડૂતનું પછી પાછળથી કોણ જવાબદારી લે અને એની રોજગારીનું શું અને એના ભવિષ્યનું શું, આવકનું એ શું.
Namaste, I am Sangeeta Ben Rathod. I am from Arvali district in Gujarat, and today I am speaking here on behalf of 2.5 million members of SEWA, the poor informal sector women workers. I myself am a small and marginal farmer and an agricultural laborer, and I would like to, before I start with what I am doing, what we are doing at SEWA, I would like to share what are the challenges that our members are facing because of climate change. I would like to start with the impact of heat. You know, when small and marginal farmers are working in the field and suddenly there is, over the past 2 years we have seen that there is so much heat. The women faint when they are working in the field. So what would they do? I mean, how would they feed their families? If they stop working, they will not earn. But if they go to work in these harsh climatic conditions, it impacts their health.
સેવામાં બધી જ પ્રકારના બહેનોનું સંગઠન છે, જેમાં મીઠા કામદાર બહેનો છે ને એ આખું વર્ષ પાણીમાં મીઠું પકવે છે અને એકદમ જો વરસાદ આવી જાય ને તો આખા વર્ષની મહેનત એમના ખરાબ જાય છે, તો એમનું એ શું થાય.
I would also like to bring your attention to other members from other trades. SEWA has organized members from over 125 different trades. Let me share the challenges faced by our salt pan workers. They work in uninhabitable working conditions for 8 months in an year, living in the desert. And when the salt that they have produced is tracked and suddenly there are unseasonal rains, the entire salt gets washed away. So should they save their own lives or should they save their income?
હું પોતે ખેડૂત છું અને હું ખેતી જ કરું છું, તો હું પણ એ જ કહેવા માગું છું કે હું આખું વર્ષ મહેનત કરું અને મારી ખેતી બગડી જાય તો મારી આવક ક્યાંથી મળે અને બીજા હું મારી બધી બહેનોને આવક ક્યાંથી મળે અને એ બીજું બધું ક્યાંથી લાવે એમ. અને જે હા, તો એ સ્વચ્છ આકાશ અંતર્ગત એક હળિયારા ગામો ઊભા કર્યા છે, જેમાં જે બેન ખેતી કરે તો ખરી પણ બગડી જાય તો શું કરવાનું, તો પછી એના માટે અમે હળિયારા ગામ ઊભા કર્યા, જેમાં અમે બાયોગેસ પ્લાન્ટ, જે કાયમ રસોડું તો બનાવવાનું જ હોય એટલે બાયોગેસ પ્લાન્ટ પર રોજ કાયમ દરરોજે લાકડા કે છાણા વીણવા જવું પડતું હતું અને એલપીજી ગેસ બહુ મોંઘો થઈ ગયો છે તો અમે બાયોગેસ પ્લાન્ટ શરૂ કર્યા છે.
So, I myself am I'm a farmer, and therefore, whatever the issues and challenges that I shared, I also am facing the same. And because of that, we understood what our members are facing, and therefore, we have launched at SEVA the Clean Skies campaign, under which we help in strengthening women's climate action. So, one of the initiatives under the Clean Skies campaign is to set up green villages. In these green villages, we help women to adopt clean green energy solutions both in their lives, in their day-to-day lives, as well as in their livelihoods. One such initiative is the biogas initiative, because women in the rural areas still use wood-fired cook stoves for cooking, and because of that they have to walk several kilometers for fetching firewood. If it's unseasonal rain, then the firewood gets drenched, there's a lot of smoke, and LPG cylinders are becoming expensive day by day. So women cannot afford clean cooking like LPG solutions, and therefore we have now introduced biogas for these rural households.
રસોઈની જાતે એમને નહીં થઈ જતી. જો પહેલાં આપણે ખેતી કરવી પડે એના માટે, ખેતી કરીને એને ઘેર લાવવી પડે, એના માટે પાણી પણ જરૂર પડે. તો એના માટે અમે સોલર પંપ પણ વાપરીએ છીએ અને સોલર પંપ વાપરીએ એટલે પાણી ડ્રીપ પદ્ધતિથી જાય એટલે ઓછું થાય. અત્યારે જમીનમાં પાણી સ્તરથી નીચું જઈ રહ્યું છે.
So we solved the energy problem by bringing in biogas. But what about the ingredients? If I don't have livelihood, how will I buy food for cooking? And therefore I need to strengthen my livelihood, which is agriculture. As we know, the water tables are depleting. There is a lot of shortage of water for irrigation. And therefore what we have done is we are trying to introduce precision irrigation technology. It is a solar pneumatic precision irrigation technology. So women are able to save water and still produce better quality crops.
Great. Thank you. We'll come back to you. Let's go to South America and hear from Ana Laura. Tell us about your innovation.
Okay. Thank you so much. I don't know if you can hear me well.
Yes.
Right now. I was so interested about the history of my partners. Thank you so much. My innovation is a system of traceability based on blockchain. No? This is kind of like weird when I talk about bees and the organic producer beekeepers from the Gran Chaco area, which is the second largest forest in the whole Latin America after the Amazon. And it's a pretty dry area, and then it's pretty isolated. No? Between one producer and the other community can be like 900 kilometers between them. So I travel to visit them, so it's going to be maybe the best experience of my life traveling with the bees. And that is a system who allows to us and the producers, and most the female producers, to access to information, no? And to the traceability system to certify organic and fair trade also. And to verify the information has to be the autonomy of that data, no? Because when the woman knows about that, what is the level of productivity, the number of beehives, and even though the number of women in the network of producers, the information circulates in a different way, no? And mostly when the consumer can access to that information and put one price for that, no? And to put visibility on that women's, no? Mostly I want to speak about the beekeepers in general, no? But for us allows to tackle this issue to understand that the women don't access to the connectivity systems, or maybe I call it TICs, the information technology and communication, no? Skills and tools. So in that way, we implemented a new project to connect this village, no? And to put like local services of internet there. So we teach the women to manage the internet services and to put fees on the other homes in the village. And mostly we trying to form like a tutor, no? We call it like tutora, nanum, and to form the other people in the village to know and to trying to improve in the skills using the technology, no? And mostly for use the traceability system, because when we start that project, we couldn't see that, okay, we have this technology, but we don't have the knowledge to manage it. So that is, I think, thank you for the panelists before us to clear this part. And I think the other point here in this innovation is when you add value to one value chain for value of food productions, you need to add value with the local knowledge. No? And so the traceability system can be and exists because it's based in the local production of honey producers, no? Based in the local knowledge. And then I want to add a little bit more of this because when I say local, is even though the native biodiversity, no? Because with traceability, you can select different areas of this region and put in value about how nature can speak with us and speak with the consumers, knowing which or what is behind that honey jar, no? Mm-hmm. So that is
interesting, right? Are you still here? It's been a long day. Yeah. Anyway, they've introduced us to their innovations, and as I see our time is running out, I want to pack my questions, and I want to give you an opportunity to ask your questions. Is that okay? Anyone who wants to ask a question? One hand, and okay, I'll take this too. Okay, you first. You need a microphone? Okay.
I think I'll be loud enough.
Online, yeah.
Okay. Right. I have a question for the gentleman. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. I'm interested in the silos that you make because you say you are fabricating. Yeah, so I'm just interested in what material are you using? And then to all the panelists, they are the three. Because when we are talking food systems, we are talking about improving livelihoods for the people on the ground. Are the innovations that you are doing improving your livelihoods and the people that you work with? Because what we have seen over time is that, for example, someone comes and buys your honey and they take it for export. They are the ones who will benefit more in terms of profits, and they leave you just with a little bit of profit. So I wanted to hear from you how that is working for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take your question, but I only have time for 2 questions.
My question is for the first set of panelists.
Okay.
And we all mentioned that we should have a gendered lens applied to all the climate adaptation and mitigation measures that we start taking up. So what will be the most effective way to monitor and evaluate that is actually having an impact on what we are trying to address?
It's the same question, but if I take it, I'll have to take his.
Thank you. So my addition to her question is, what really are the ways we can, what ways can we use to engender climate-smart agriculture? What really are the practical ways we can use to engender it?
Okay. Is yours a complicated question? Well, it's only ladies, so should I still give you a chance, or you need a microphone?
So thank you. I'm Pavel from Bangladesh. So we are passing the 16 days of global activism against the gender-based violence. So I want to know from you, what do you think the climate crisis is increasing the gender-based violence in your area?
Okay, thank you. Eliud, are you going to connect with her? You can just answer briefly in 30 seconds and then maybe connect with her after the session.
Okay. All
right. The
yeah.
silos?
Okay. The silos we use fabricated steel. It's steel, galvanized steel. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else to take another question?
સંગીતાબેન, એમનો એવો પ્રશ્ન છે કે તમે આજે બધા કાર્યક્રમ કર્યા ને જે તમે પણ હરિયાળા ગામની વાત કરી, તો એનાથી બહેનોની રોજગારી આવક વધી કે પછી ખાલી સંગઠન જ મજબૂત થયું?
ના, આવક વધી. હા, તો એ બહેનો જે પહેલાં ખેતી કરતા હતા ને, જે આ વાતાવરણ બદલાવથી જે ખેતી બગડી જતી હતી, તો પહેલાં જે રાસાયણિક ખાતરો વાપરતા હતા અને જૈવિક આપણે જંતુનાશક દવાઓ વાપરતા હતા, એ અત્યારે નથી વાપરતા. અત્યારે એ ઘરે જ ગૌમૂત્રનો છંટકાવથી જીવામૃતને એવું બનાવીને ઘરે જ છંટકાવ કરે છે.
So to the question whether these adaptation measures are actually strengthening the livelihoods of the women themselves, she says that it is in fact directly strengthening the livelihoods of the women, because previously the women were using chemical fertilizers and pesticides, but now they are using the slurry of the biogas, so it has reduction in the input cost. Similarly, it has improved the quality of yield, and so it's a direct impact to the women's livelihoods only and not to the overall.
જેનાથી એમ વચ્ચે આંતરપાક પણ કરીએ, એનાથી એક પાક બગડી જાય તો બીજું પાકમાંથી પણ આવક મળે અને એ છાણિયું ખાતર નાખવાથી ઓછા ખર્ચે વધુ ઉત્પાદન, એટલે કે જમીન પણ લાંબા સમય સુધી ટકી રહે.
And we also help as a part of our Green Village initiative. I missed mentioning that, but we also provide training to our women about sustainable and organic agriculture. And because of that, women are now starting to use biopesticides and biofertilizers, and which has led to improving the quality of their soil also, and therefore also it is very beneficial to them.
Okay, and to our first expert group, anyone to answer that?
Maybe I'll take that to quickly plug our session tomorrow. So we have a session at 9:30 in the morning where we're actually talking about how do we build gender and nutrition metrics into monitoring efforts of our climate action. So we hear about a lot of things happening on the ground. Policies are now being written with some gender and maybe less nutrition goals in them, but how do we actually measure and track that progress? And so I hope that all of you will come to the Food and Agriculture Pavilion tomorrow at 9:30. Thank you.
Todd, do you want to say something? Okay, in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think the important thing with the metric question is that climate change adaptation is not just a question of productivity. We have to actually care about this as an outcome and track it. Regarding the broader question about how to engender climate-smart agriculture, we've talked a lot about gender inequality and women's capacities and behaviors and this. Gender inequality is not primarily a function of women's behavior. It's also a function of men's behavior. And so if we're going to talk about gender inequality and gender equality through agriculture, it needs to be about the relationship, not about just women's skills, training, and knowledge. Gender is relational, so it has to involve men somehow.
Solid points, and men always must have a place on the table. Anyway, I'm just, because you okay. No. I'm just making reference to the fact that he's here and you are here, same seat. Anyway, we can't really discuss women without also, the positive masculinities bit. That's what I meant. So thank you very much. We have to bring it to a close, but please stay around and you can interact with either the first expert group and also this second expert group with live experiences from the field. But for now, I want to thank Sanjitaben from Gujarat, India, Eliud from Kenya, and Ana Laura from Argentina. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, and now we have to bring this to a close, and to do that, to offer closing remarks, I'd like to invite Dr. Jemima Njuki. Dr. Jemima Njuki, who is Chief of Economic Empowerment Section at UN Women. She was previously at International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, as the Director for Africa, where she worked with African governments and key stakeholders to develop evidence for transformative policy change. She also led the UN Food Systems Summit, Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Lever of Change. You're welcome, Dr. Njuki. Can use the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian. It's actually so nice to be amongst friendly faces and people that I know and people that I have worked with over the years. And while I'm now at UN Women leading our economic empowerment work, which is quite a broad area of work, it includes the work on food systems, on climate, on women and decent work, our work on financing for gender equality, but also the work that we do to support government on gender-responsive macroeconomic policies. I think I'm justified to say that I grew up in food systems and in gender and food systems. So it's always a pleasure to be in this community and to really listen to all the new advances that are happening in research. And also really glad because with this team and with this community, we usually don't have to start with why gender equality is important for food systems or why you cannot achieve gender equality without equitable food systems and vice versa, because I know that's always our starting point. What I would like to focus on today is the changes that we are seeing now, the acceleration of climate change and what that is doing to not just gender inequality, but also what it's doing to food insecurity, and especially the food insecurity of women and girls. Because what we are seeing now is that these extreme weather events are increasing in intensity and frequency. Women and girls are becoming much more exposed to intense hardships, and we know why, because of some of the inequalities that we see around the world. But what these inequalities come with, what these impacts come with, is also profound impacts on the lives of women. And not just in terms of their food security, but also in terms of their exposure to other risks, including risks of gender-based violence. So one of the things that we do on an annual basis with DESA is that we release what we call a gender snapshot, and we look at the Sustainable Development Goals and look at where we are across all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals from a gender perspective. But what we also do is we use that data and forecast what is going to happen if we do not act, or what are our worst scenarios telling us, and what are the best scenarios telling us. And this year, what we are seeing is that in a worst case climate scenario, by 2050, food insecurity caused by climate change is going to increase by as much as 236 million women and girls who are going to be food insecure with the worst case climate scenario. Now, this is 105 million more women and girls than men and boys. And this is the gap that we are attributing to gender inequality. That because of gender inequality, the world is going to be hungrier, but women and girls are going to be even more hungrier than the rest of the population. And what this means is that we have to do things differently. We have to address these gender inequalities and safeguard the planet. And some of the interventions that we are seeing, they are not going to be what we call the lift all boats interventions, that we have to be strategic, we have to be intentional, we have to really target some of the thorny aspects of gender inequality that aren't changing as quickly as we would like them to change. And so one of the things that I would like to ask, and of the research community especially, that's looking at this intersection of climate, gender equality, and food security, is the fact that we have to now move from asking, why is our food system unequal? I think that's still a fundamental question, but we really must shift to then ask ourselves, what's gonna work at a scale that's large enough to impact these 236 million women and girls? And I think that's the challenge that we have today. How do we address these gender inequalities in a way that's systemic and in a way that's scalable, right? Earlier today, we launched what we called a feminist climate justice framework, because we've been tinkering with things. We've been incrementally changing things. And it is very clear right now, with all this data that we have, that these incremental changes are not what's going to shift things. I always say that the people that developed the electric light, the electric bulb, didn't get there by incrementally improving the candle, right? They got there by saying, we need a whole other way of thinking about light. And so what I'm asking us to do is think about a whole new way. We have to build on what we have, but a whole new way of systematically looking at removing these gender inequalities at scale and in a systemic way. I want to talk very briefly about this climate justice framework because I think it's very important. And it is based on this vision that we have to recognize the intersections that exist between these issues. We are saying the framework is built around 5 R's. And the first one is the recognition of women's rights, of women's knowledge, and of women's labor in the food system, in the climate space, and elsewhere. And the second R is around redistributing resources. We've had in COP with a lot of excitement, for example, all the commitments made on the loss and damage fund. For this community, it would even be more important if with the same breath we are hearing about how much of those resources are really going to go to the women in the grassroots, to the indigenous women who every day are leading the charge to secure our planet, who are leading the charge to ensure that populations are fed. Yeah. So that redistribution of resources. And the third R is around reparation. We've done women and girls a nasty, right? That we are still talking about gender inequalities today. And so this idea that we have to correct the injustices of the past is really, really important. But I want to make a couple of points with respect to how that applies to food systems. One very quick one is really amplifying those voices of women. The second point I want to make is that even as we do the work we do, we really need to address the time poverty of women, because this is really important if we are to then expect women to take the actions to address climate change. We know women are already spending a lot of time, 2.8 hours more than men on unpaid care work. And if we continue as we are doing, by 2050, we'll only have reduced this by half an hour. It's not that significant. And so as UN Women, we continue to play our part using our triple mandate to address the global policy norms that can guide the work on gender equality. We continue to play our part with coordinating the rest of the UN system, including the role we play here at COP to ensure that gender equality is integrated into the agreements and the outcomes. And we continue to play our part operationally on the ground to partner with all of you to make sure that we are changing the lives of women and girls. I'm going to stop there because I see Vivian has even come in front of me to tell me my time is up. But really, really excited to have joined you this evening and to hear all the research and the new advances that are happening within the gender and food systems research community. Thank you.
We have 2 minutes, well, even less, -2, to thank everyone and thank again for all the partners in the room, and what we hope that we can